The rain fell in thin, silver sheets as Daniel stood outside the towering glass building that looked like it could swallow the entire sky. His shirt clung to his skin, his shoes were soaked, and his trembling fingers kept tightening around the tiny hand of his 9-year-old daughter. Lily, in the reflection of the skyscrapers, sleek, flawless. Merciless he saw himself, a worn-down single father. A man life had bruised far more than he ever admitted. Someone so small compared to the empire inside. Yet he had no choice but to enter. Today, he was begging for work, not for pride, not for ambition, but for the girl gripping his hand and shivering in the cold. And at the top of that palace stood her, the woman everyone whispered about, the self-made, diamond-hearted billionaire CEO, the woman known for grinding the powerful into dust. Let alone the powerless. Valeria Stone. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, dignity, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness. Your support truly keeps stories like this alive. Daniel took a deep breath and led Lily into the lobby. Warmth greeted them, but so did eyes filled with suspicion. He ignored them all and approached the front desk, explaining he was here for the final interview for a maintenance supervisor position. An opportunity he desperately needed. A job he had prayed for. A lifeline in the middle of the storm. When he was finally taken upstairs, he entered a spacious boardroom with windows stretching from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city below like a map she owned. There she was, Valeria, Stone, standing at the edge of the room, her silhouette sharp against the skyline. Every line of her posture radiated power and cold elegance. She didn't turn around when he entered. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't greet him. Instead, she said something that made his heart drop. "So you're the single father begging for a job?" Her voice was smooth but cutting. He swallowed. "I'm qualified, ma'am. I read your file," she interrupted, still not facing him. "You're overqualified, actually. A former construction manager, project coordinator. You used to manage entire teams. You used to make 6 figures. Finally, she turned, her ice blue eyes narrowing. "And now look at you." He felt Lily shift uncomfortably behind him, hiding partly behind his leg. Valeria's gaze dropped to the child. "You brought her," he nodded softly. "I didn't have childcare today." "Not my problem," she said simply. And yet she walked closer to the point where Daniel could smell her perfume. Cold, jasmine, and winter frost, and looked down at his muddy shoes, leaving faint marks on the pristine marble floor. "You're dirty," she said. "You're dripping water everywhere. And you're asking me to hire you, to trust you with responsibility, with my company's appearance. I'm sorry, ma'am." "The rain excuses," she cut in. Daniel lowered his head. His pride was already worn thin, but hearing the disdain in her voice felt like someone grinding a boot against his soul. Then, slowly, deliberately, Valeria stepped one polished heel forward, placing it inches from his muddy shoe. "Do you know what I require in my company, Mr. Hale?" He looked up. "Hard work, discipline, loyalty." "No," she said, her lips curling slightly. "Obedience." Confusion rippled across his face. "Ma'am." She lifted her foot slightly. "If you want to work for me, if you want to prove you're worthy of stepping into my building, clean my shoe." His face drained of color. "And after that," she said softly but with a blade's sharpness, "kiss my foot and thank me for considering marrying someone like you." Daniel couldn't breathe for a moment. It wasn't just humiliation. It was cruelty dressed as power. Lily's small voice whispered, "Daddy, let's go." His throat tightened. Anger rose like wildfire, but so did desperation. This job meant survival, rent, food, medicine for Lily's asthma. He felt himself drowning in the impossible choice. Valeria studied his torment with unsettling calmness. "Well?" she asked. For a few long seconds, Daniel did nothing. His knees tensed, ready to collapse, not out of obedience, but despair. And just as he leaned forward a fraction, Lily squeezed his hand hard. Her touch snapped something inside him, something fragile but unbreakable. His dignity. He stood straight. "No," he whispered, her eyebrow arched, surprised. "No, no, ma'am," he said, louder now, voice trembling but determined. "I've lost almost everything in my life, but I won't lose the last piece of myself my daughter looks up to." Valeria blinked, the slightest flicker of emotion crossing her face, but it vanished instantly. "Get out," she said. "Both of you." Daniel nodded, swallowing the rock in his throat. He walked out with Lily, every step heavy, every heartbeat filled with regret but not shame. He knew he'd done the right thing. Yet outside the building, he could feel reality closing in like a tightening noose. He had no money left, no job, no backup plan, and a little girl who deserved a world better than the one he could give her. That night, he cooked the last bits of rice in their kitchen. He tucked Lily into bed and stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of father he really was. What he didn't know was this: someone had seen everything. A woman from the boardroom next door had overheard the exchange. She had quietly recorded the entire scene and sent it to the company's shareholders and to Valeria Stone herself. The next morning, at the same time Daniel was dragging his weary body to the local job center, Valeria stood in her luxurious corner office watching the footage on her phone. But what she saw didn't amuse her or validate her authority. It haunted her in the footage. She saw a man who had swallowed pain for years just to keep his child safe. A man who needed help, not humiliation. But most disturbingly, she saw something she had forgotten long ago. Her past self. Years before, she was the feared billionaire. Valeria had been a poor waitress, supporting her critically ill mother. She had promised herself she would become powerful, so powerful no one could ever shame her again. But in protecting herself, she had grown into the very kind of monster who once tormented her. And the child. The way Lily had said, "Daddy, let's go." It pierced Valeria deeper than she expected. For hours, she sat in silence. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. Later that afternoon, Daniel received a call from an unknown number. He answered hesitantly. "Mr. Hale," Valeria said, her voice softer, trembling ever so slightly. "Need to see you, please." He almost hung up. He almost said no, but something inside told him to face her one last time, not for a job, not for forgiveness, but for closure. When he arrived at her office, she was already standing in the lobby, not behind her throne-like desk high above the city. He immediately noticed something different. No cold stare, no posture dripping with superiority, but humanity, uncomfortable humanity. Before he could speak, she stepped closer and bowed her head. Not a little, fully, deeply, the lobby gasped. Even Lily stared wide-eyed. "I was wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "I was cruel. I was everything I promised myself I'd never become. You owe me nothing, but I owe you an apology I can never repay. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She continued, You are willing to sacrifice your pride for your daughter. That makes you a better parent, a better person, than I have been in a long time. She stepped aside and revealed something behind her. A signed employment contract, not for maintenance, not for assistant work, but for project operations manager, the role he once held years ago. A salary triple what he used to earn, full health insurance for him and Lily, a childcare subsidy, flexible hours. Daniel couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. Valeria swallowed. This isn't pity. It's respect. And a chance for me to fix what I broke. Lily tugged her father's sleeve. Daddy, is this real? He knelt and hugged her tightly. Then he stood and looked at Valeria, not with anger, not with gratitude, but with understanding. I'll accept, he said softly, but not because I need charity, because you're trying to change. She nodded, tears silently falling. From that day onward, Valeria transformed. Her company culture, she treated employees with humility and warmth. She created programs for single parents. She opened herself up to vulnerability in ways she never thought possible. And as for Daniel, he didn't just work for the company, he helped reshape it. His empathy, a guiding voice, his experience, his leadership, and his gentle strength turned him into one of the most respected figures in the organization. In time, Valeria found herself drawn to the one thing she never expected: his kindness, his humility, the way he loved his daughter with an unshakable heart. But she never brought up her old, cruel words. She never joked about marriage. She never crossed a line, because Daniel had taught her that real love was built on respect, not power. Yet one evening, when the company hosted a charity gala, Lily ran up to Valeria in her tiny dress and sparkly shoes and hugged her legs. Thank you, she whispered, for helping my daddy. Valeria froze, then she melted, and Daniel saw something change in her Isa. Softness that had been buried for years under layers of armor. Sometime later, after months of friendship, trust, and healing, Valeria walked beside Daniel in the company garden and asked quietly, Do you think people who are broken can learn to love again? He smiled gently. I think that's the only kind of love that ever lasts. She breathed out a fragile, trembling breath, and for the first time, she let herself hope. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Stories. Your support helps us continue creating emotional, life-changing stories.